Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Jared Belsky, author of You Get the Agency You Deserve and founder and CEO of Acadia. Jared, what a pleasure to see you, whether it's virtually or perhaps it feels like reality. But what a pleasure. Congratulations on your book and welcome, welcome, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Feelings mutual. It's good to be talking today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, look, let's just start. I really like the title of your book, You Get the Agency You Deserve. It, I think we all know it's a popular expression in the industry, but it's often one of those throwaway lines. And you have a suggestion about how to do things better. Um, why did you write it now? I mean, are client agency relationships at a low point, or is it just so overwhelming now with all the technology and issues? Why now?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a cheeky title to get some attention, but there's a lot of authenticity at the heart of it. So why now? There's two reasons. First, there's a data, so called that the head reason, then there's a bit of a heart. So the head reason, I think Ad Age published a recent survey that was something like 40% of clients are looking for a new agency. And so if a little under half of all clients are out there with a wandering eye, something's broken, right? Something's inefficient in the ecosystem. The second thing is we know we're in this somewhat complicated economic moment. And so when you're in an economic moment that's difficult, everyone's interested in getting better with what they have. And so I took those two data points and I said, let me turn my attention to a story that is untold. The fact that there is a complicated, unproductive agency client dynamic is not new, to your point. It's just that more has been written about how agencies can get better. To my knowledge, to my research, almost nothing has been written on how clients can be the best version of their self to get more out of the agency. And so that became the why now. Yeah.
No, it's interesting that you say that, and you're absolutely right. Yes, economics is always a major point, but the again, just to emphasize that point, that 40% of clients are looking for an agency is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
Your book, as you say, taken from the client side, and you've been on the client side, you've been on the agency side, but your book also suggests that very few marketers are trained in
Yeah.
client agency relationships. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, let me start off with myself as a data point, then I'll get to my sort of lunch series. As you mentioned, I was proudly a client at the Coca-Cola company. I was in brand management on the Fanta brand. And the truth, as much as I'm embarrassed to say it, I was a terrible client, right? I was in my late 20s. I gave bad briefs. I gave bad directions. I was short. I rolled my eyes. I probably felt I could do it better. I mean, I'm embarrassed. I'm just so thankful I wasn't filmed. I was embarrassed. I was not a great client, right? So I have that as a reference point. But I'll tell you also something I remember about Coke, and I think of Coke fondly. I was trained by the Coca-Cola company in everything. I got trained on how to pull data on case sales. I was trained by an incredible HR department on all things about the Coca-Cola way. I was trained by an incredible boss on brand positioning and briefing. I was trained by the field system on how to move product from an idea out into a cooler. The one thing I was not trained on was how to get the most out of my agencies. And I find this curious because if I think back to my expense ledger, besides my media expense, the number one greatest expense were agency fees. So that got me thinking a lot about this. So the second part of your answer is simple. I went on this lunch series where, like you, I'm sort of lucky to have some close friends who are CMOs. And sometimes after a glass of wine, you can get even more truth. And I started asking some of my friends who are client side marketers one very simple question. And I meant it with a lot of love and respect. And just, for people who don't know me, I'm a very optimistic, non-sarcastic person. So just know that this question was very authentic. And I asked all the marketers, why are clients not so great at being clients? And I got three answers, lunch after lunch after lunch. Number one, clients are rarely, if ever, trained on how to be a great client. Number two, I don't see why. Why, like, because of the power dynamic. Why be better at being a client? And three, no boss of mine has ever inspected or rewarded me or acknowledged on a review or otherwise that this is important. And so I just said, oh, wow, what an interesting phenomenon. The underlying reason why clients aren't great at being clients is that they've never been trained, they've never been forced to care, and they've never been taught to care. It's not anyone's fault. And that's the optimistic side of me. This is not a book about tisk, tisk, tisk. Clients are incredible, and everyone wants to show up and be their best. No one's been taught how to be their best. And in
That's a
that
very
gap,
good.
yeah, in that gap, there's value that's being destroyed or value that's not being realized.
Yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you before. Talk a little bit about that. I do want to get on to some of the
Sure.
practicalities of the book,
Yep.
but you did say something, and I'll quote you if you don't
Yeah.
mind, that
Absolutely.
marketers are unwittingly causing their own destruction. The
Yeah.
18-month average agency tenure triggers an economic destruction that few executives appreciate or understand how to solve. Now, if nothing brings to the fore those 3 points that you just mentioned, it's certainly that statement.
Yeah, I think for reasons I'm not sure I even understand, this is the one area of the marketing, and I'd almost even say business ecosystem that gets a free pass. Let's put this through the lens of a client we might all know. To be clear, is not my client, just using a brand we'd all know, Kroger, okay? A large advertiser. Kroger has a media agency, they have a social agency, they have a creative agency, they have analytics agency, and even more than that, right? Um, Easy to say their fees that they're paying these agencies could be some total of 30 to could be even $80 million, right? Just a huge line item. And that's just the agency fee. Then there's the money they're stewarding, which if you kind of look it up, you can kind of see it's at least north of $200 million. So you look at this huge investment and the agency fee, and I say to myself, there's some humans at the top of that, clients, who accidentally aren't getting the most out of their agencies because they kind of get a free pass. Now, let me just explain what I mean. Let me juxtapose that against some other things we're all familiar with. If there is a technologist over at Kroger who decides to get a new updated instance of Salesforce, he or she is going to be held to task. Are they getting the most out of the Salesforce? How productive is it? How is it utilized? If the HR person lobbied to get some new HR software, how is it used? How is it generating ROI? How many people are using the software? Um, if Kroger had an assembly line that is able to identify the freshest fruit, it would be judged on how often does it catch an unripe banana and it's disposed, right? Everything else in that Kroger ecosystem is inspected 7 ways to Sunday. But yet, these wonderful marketers, and they are, these are some of my best friends, not just professionally, but in real human life. It's sort of like they're just told, use your gut, here, write a brief, have a QBR, share your vision of what a great commercial is. Tell them where you think the media should be on Thursday Night Football. It is too um, by instinct. And given the money at stake and the opportunity at stake, if there was a little bit better training, I think there could be millions of more dollars extracted versus destroyed.
It's interesting that you say that. A couple of things popped into my mind. I love the fact that you put it in the context of it being a business problem, or certainly a problem in the larger big business ecosystem. The other thing that popped in my mind is kind of the counterweight to that is, what about procurement? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think if you listen to most people at
Yep.
agencies, even and the
Yep.
marketing side, in the last decade or
Yeah.
longer, the move to having procurement analyze so much more has certainly, I think, been one move, regardless of some of the emotional, feelings about it,
Yep.
has certainly
Yep.
been one move to try to look at marketing with some kind of a yardstick.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard because it is one of the areas in the company that is about things emotional, and it is about changing behavior, or getting consumers to change behavior,
Yeah.
and it is so it is a tricky area. you know?
It is tricky. You know, what's funny, and I love your question. One of the issues as my thesis, right, is that if clients were trained how to get more out of their agency, they could create value, right? So that might be better onboarding, better briefing, how to say you have the right budget, how to have one goal and not four, right? So my book, my thesis is about clients having the right to get better and therefore get more out of their agencies. I completely think procurement has a role to play here, but it's not a substitute for A. And funny enough that you mentioned procurement, sometimes what I actually see is in a company's rush to get procurement in to bring a empirical lens, procurement actually will get what I call is a short-term win for a long-term loss. So just to kind of explain what I mean there, I've seen procurement come in the 11th hour of a negotiation and get a financial win for their CFO and get it to where they were able to knock off 4 FTEs. Well, guess what? They just knocked off the analytics people. And now all of a sudden, the client who launched an RFP that was about a performance quantitative media agency just lost their 4 analytics people. So I think procurement has a role to play. I think procurement can be good, but procurement and clients have to align. And I still believe fundamentally clients have a big role to play here and a huge opportunity. You know what I would just maybe to go to the heart here, what I don't think clients know. Clients hang the moon, the sun, and the stars in an agency's eyes. We go to bed thinking of our client. We wake up in the morning thinking of our client. Our team hangs in every word. We decipher emails though we're dating. And so if a client realized fully that opportunity, that with just a little better direction and a little bit better briefing and a little bit better guidelines on budgets and a little more patience when the relationship goes south, there's millions of dollars of economic opportunity to create because there are only 2 types of clients in the entire world. Want to know what they are? Clients that the
Good
best
and
agency.
bad. No,
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think you're right. I'll add
no.
a twist.
Uh,
There are 2 types of clients. You're right. I'll add a twist. Clients that the best agency talent runs to, and clients where the best agency talents run away from. So the book is to try and help every reader and every client be the one that the talent wants to run to.
yeah, let's go to the book for a bit. And I absolutely agree with what you say. Okay, let the book, another element that I love about the book is it offers 20 practical and emotional lessons about how to create better partnerships.
Yeah.
And so much of what you just said about making it better is really focused on that emotional element of how agencies really see the brands they work on, it's sun,
Yeah.
moon, stars, and what they do. But okay, let's start in a very easy way. What is the number one step? Where should clients begin?
Yeah. So sometimes I try and think through the book itself, and I've come to the answer. I think the right answer is there's a chapter called "Therapy is Cheaper Than Divorce," which might hit both of us or certain listeners as very human, right? Because that's probably true in our personal lives, not just in our business lives. But in the context of an agency client relationship, this is what I mean. Let's go back to the ad age stat. A little under 50% of clients are thinking right now about moving on from their agency. And let's be honest, in any given hour, there's a client out there thinking of wanting to move on from their agency. What I'd love to coach or almost beg for is a minute of patience and to get them to realize that there is more economic value in trying to work through a problem rather than just bail and launch an RFP. And I think there's 2 sides of it. First of all, I think there's introspection for the client that's available. For example, a few key questions. Am I just irritated with my day to day? And I like the team, right? Because sometimes a client's feeling about an agency is shaped through their day to day contact. Well, guess what? You can ask for a rotation of that day to day person. Maybe the agency itself is good, right? That's an example of therapy. Have you directly explained the 5 things that are disappointing you, or have you dropped hints and tea leaves, hoping they'll read your mind, right? Have you had a proper detailed laying out of your struggles. Number three, your own role. I mean this with a gentle heart, but how are your briefs? Are your budget guidelines clear? Do you have 17 goals? You want growth and margin and awareness and ROAS, or is there a SMART goal? And I think that people, if they just would pause and lower the temperature and go out to a dinner or have an hour Zoom with a coffee or a glass of wine and talk through these things, it would be better to go from good to great rather from good to fired to a new person. And I just think that's it. Um, as I mentioned, there's two sides of this. Agencies have to step up. We do need to get better as an industry, no doubt. But I think clients can lead the way by trying to elongate this embarrassingly short tenure of 18 months, which is widely reported that that's the average agency client relationship.
You
Yeah,
raise some very good points, and it prompts a lot of questions. Let me just start with one that follows the stream of your points of where you go.
please.
You you often emphasize that clients shouldn't tell the agency the answer, but
Yeah,
share the challenge.
yeah,
Can you talk about that a little bit in the context of an example like Red Roof Inn, which I know that you've written extensively about?
yeah. I will answer it directly. I'll say this is in the broader pattern that I want again clients to realize that clients have this incredible opportunity to motivate. And sometimes they accidentally, and I use that word purposely, accidentally squander it by being so specific that they're not allowing the talent they just hired to give them their best. And so the story I'll share is it's a simple one. Red Roof Inn is indeed our client here at Acadia. CMO over there is an incredible marketer named Marina McDonald. She has an incredible team, Rosalind, and too many to name. Um, and they are an economy lodging concept, right? They know who they are. Proudly, we know who they are. They know who they are. And they were asking us a simple question: how could we win on TikTok? Should we win on TikTok? Right? They had some management that was a little skittish. Is this right for this sort of middle economic sort of customer? And what we helped them realize was something very simple. During the pandemic, everyone went out and got a puppy, right? And if you're rich, you can afford a puppy nanny or boarding. But if you have a blue collar job or you're a trucker traveling or you're a traveling saleswoman, you can't afford a puppy nanny. Pup is coming with you. So what we helped them lean into was that they are the most pet friendly brand in the country. They will let pets stay free. They will put out a true welcome to the pet because the pet's a member of a family for those who are not wealthy. Then what happened was the second insight was a big one. We can't out glamour Hyatt. We can't out glamour Expedia. We can't out glamour Marriott. So we just really leaned into this idea. We helped them invent this character called Red Rufus, and we helped them create a very pet friendly, pet forward TikTok, which now like has 100,000 followers, a crazy amount of engagement. It's helped them boost sales. And I guess the point of the story, that brief, I'm sure, could have been, "Hey, Acadia, we want to be on TikTok the following way with the following images, with the following thing." And guess what? We would have delivered them those 12 donuts. But instead, they said to us, "We're hungry. What do you have to eat?" And I just think that clients go through these incredible RFPs to meet creative souls or analytical souls who are going to help them transform their business. And then they order a BLT. Well, guess what? A BLT is bacon, lettuce, and tomato. That's not that hard. I get my 6-year-old son to make a BLT. But if you said, I'm hungry and I'm trying to eat healthy, do you have any ideas? Well, you'll get some incredible food.
Oh, you
And
make a beautiful point and that's why I think sometimes examples are
yeah,
just so beautiful. They
yeah,
bring things to mind so much more. Speaking of examples,
yeah,
um, you mentioned that you interviewed quite a number of marketers, and I know casually, informally, and so on.
yeah,
Aside from the 3 points that you mentioned earlier,
yeah.
um, was there is there any way you could share some insights from some of those conversations or maybe some excerpt of a
Yeah.
chat? that really stood out to you?
You know, it's funny. My mind is lost for a specific quote, but I'll share a sentiment that I thought was very heartfelt. Um, this one particular CMO was able to share to me sort of a feeling of so it's not just so much like embarrassment, but a feeling of acknowledgement that they weren't a great client, a feeling that it should be so obvious, a feeling that of course she should be inspirational, and of course she should just wake up and know how to brief, and of course she should know how to deal with 20 creatives or 15 analytics people. It was a feeling she wanted me to understand that just because she's CMO doesn't mean she knows everything. And she in particular inspired me to write this book because she was so vulnerable. She's like, no, I was never taught this. She said, I've got the greatest boss and mentor in the world, but this is one area that I've never been nurtured in. And so I think that's the spirit of which the book was written, but also I think our industry could approach things in the best way, which is understanding this horrible statistic of the fact that 50% of the people are always looking. It's because agencies and clients are often trying to hold too many cards to their vest versus being vulnerable and honest and open. And I think that's the opportunity for our industry. And I hear myself talk, and you could say, hey, Jared, that sounds like a lot of hippie BS. But honestly, we are in the communication business. Um, there's no assembly line to oil. The oil, the WD 40 in this business you and I find ourselves in, it's emotional currency. We don't have a conveyor belt. So instead of rolling your eyes when your client's mad, call them up afterwards and say, hey, I felt that you were a little upset with that meeting. What do you think went poorly? Oh, God, Lord, did I just find this out? Or I find out that my client's having a divorce. Because guess what? There's a humanity to this business. And so I know I don't have that sound bite, but I think sharing the essence with you, which is there's this vulnerability that we forget, and especially when we go to the ANA conference or an Ad Age conference, and you have all these beautiful people up on these panels who seem to have all the answers, but deep down, we're all learning together, and that's why this just feels like an area to learn together on.
No, that's well said. I have one very quick
Yeah,
question for
sure.
you, then one
Yeah,
that might be longer. So, I think you're absolutely right about pausing and not only thinking about how to make, have a human conversation and make things
yeah,
better. But what about, the role of client agency relationship folks? I mean, that seems to be a big industry. I'm
yeah,
assuming that
yeah.
you would believe that they can be helpful in this, or do you suggest really going to the core? I'm just curious because, it's interesting in the
Great.
context of this.
Yeah, I'll give you a yes and because I'm privileged enough to know some of these folks, call them agency consultants or folks who are kind of sit in the middle of client and agency. There's some great names, too many to name. I think they bring sometimes a third party objectivity that's needed. The only thing I'll say, very similar to a therapist in our life or in a marriage or in a partnership, is that sometimes I wish that could be the second step or an and then because I think they bring again. I'll say this great objectivity. What I think though is there's a lot we can do the agency and the client first, right? Again, there is rare that people stop every. One thing we do with some of our larger clients is every quarter um, we'll do a mutual survey. How are things going? Anonymous, right? And you'll have these quotes that you can bring to a conversation to say, oh, I see you don't feel we're moving fast enough. Let's discuss that. Or I see you don't think our analyst is good. Should we talk about a rotation? So I think what I'll just say without repeating myself is I think those third parties play a huge role in our agency ecosystem. They can help client and agency. But I think what I want my main message to be to viewers or listeners is there are some baseline things that we can do to improve that relationship as well. And it's
I,
free.
I think that's fair. I think that's a balanced
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
Let me add on to that by referring to
Sure.
something else that you said in the book. One of your recommendations, and it's a great one, is to
Yeah.
treat your agency like an
Mm.
extension of your team.
Yeah.
And that
Mm.
is amazingly important. But let me just take another aspect to that.
Okay.
I'm just curious, given the current trend to so many in-house agencies, do you then believe that marketers are actually equipped to create their own in-house agencies? Or if clients take your advice about making an agency part of their team, do they need an in-house agency?
$1 million question. Should marketers
I
in-house?
know.
And I love the question. Look, while I'm proud to be CEO of an agency, at heart, I'm a business person and a business historian. So let me share a thought before I come back to present. Somewhere in the 1980s, the Coca-Cola company was doing a huge amount of cinema advertising. And so they thought it was strategic of a channel, and they went and bought Columbia Pictures. Because hey, if we vertically integrate and we own the cinemas, we own the pictures, and we want to get our sodas into those all important moments, well, doesn't one plus one equal seven? Okay. Well, in the late '80s, Roberto Goizueta, one of the best CEOs of all time, divested Columbia Pictures with a large write off, and at that press conference said something very simple: "I've come to the determination that at its core, the Coca-Cola company serves delicious beverages and creates memories for families and friends. We are not in the movie business." So let me use that story to answer your question. If I'm Capital One, which at heart is a data company, absolutely it should consider building its own analytics function in house and maybe even taking performance marketing, right? Search and so forth in house. Why? Because Capital One has more engineers than the entire advertising complex combined. It would make sense because it's at its core. But if there's a company in the Midwest, let's just it's some international tire conglomerate like Michelin or whatever, should they be in the business of making TV ads and spots? Should they be in the business of search marketing, where the talent might be thinner and at heart they're a manufacturer? I don't know. So I think the question is not should people in house or not. I think what they have to start off with the question: what is the core of our company, and is the core of our company necessitate that we bring that function in house? Um, I think people make a big deal about this, right? Have you ever seen a press release for I don't know, go back to Kroger. We are bringing our accounting function in house. No, they have an accounting function. So in some cases, it makes sense to have a creative function. In a lot of cases, when it's non-core to your business, I think an agency brings you a lot of leverage and creativity, right? So I think if I guess to be less roundabout, I think that it is very important for our industry not to be territorial and not to be a bunch of babies. At some points, it is a great thing for clients to in-house. And if I was running Capital One, I would absolutely in-house performance marketing and analytics. But for a lot of clients where none of that's at their core, they should get help. I just think it's that simple. Our industry is an echo chamber on this issue, to be honest. Being a
Yeah,
bunch
no,
of babies.
it's you raise a good point, and
Yeah.
the Capital One example is particularly good because it is finance, it is banking, it is proprietary information, and there are a lot of even
Yeah.
legal safeguards that they have to put into place. So you're right, it's different for each situation. It's just I'm always curious about trends. And obviously, this has been trending for a while. And I think, with every trend, there's a counter trend. And then finally, that seems to be the way we find balance, sadly.
You, you know
We
what? I couldn't agree more. The trend, who's to blame a little bit for the trend? You're going to find my answer surprising. Agencies. We, at times, create choice, a binary choice for clients because the industry has made it very sometimes territorial, right? We'll be your creative AOR or not. We'll be your media AOR or not. With the agency I'm proud to be running now that I co-founded with a friend, it's privately held, Acadia, we're just trying to help our clients. So it's not about all or nothing. We have some clients where we do some services and we actually help them in house. I just think our industry got really territorial. And so, in a world of territory, some clients just picked up their toys and went home. And I don't blame them.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And, sometimes you have to look at it from the other way as well. There's just so many, not only choices, but
Yeah.
ways that you can cobble together a great team. And if you don't care about definitions, then what makes the difference as long as people understand what the objective is and people are committed to it. I mean, I don't want to talk in platitudes, but you started, let's talk about just a minute because you mentioned your own agency,
Yeah.
and one of the things, I mean, you started it only in the summer of 2021. Let's
Yeah.
talk about something that you didn't mention, and that's the extraordinary growth rate that it had in the first 6 months. 100 employees and 4 acquisitions. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary. And if anybody's watching the video, they can see that there's also at least one dog. So you've got a lot going on. But
Yeah.
one of the things I love is that your description of the agency is also somewhat client centric, in that you call yourselves a modern digital agency obsessed with your growth.
Yeah.
Um, is that why Acadia is so successful?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I'll just say, look, first of all, starting a business in your late 40s is incredible. It's a treat, it's a treasure, it's also stressful. But the idea was when Sean and I started Acadia, um, we wanted to provide an alternative. Kind of had three things at heart that have been part of that success. First of all, we wanted to solve a problem. What we thought is that the mid market, right? Think of California Pizza Kitchen, think of Maggiano's, these sort of clients. They wanted the sophistication of the large agencies, but they just didn't want to be wasteful. So we said, let's bring together services like analytics, like Amazon expertise, like paid media expertise, social marketing expertise, creative. Let's bring it all into one place. But the real answer to your question, what's different? Our focus on core values has been a game changer. At the other agencies I've been a part of, core values were sort of sometimes just words that were echoed. They've really part of our operating system. They're how we hire, they're how we fire, they're how we find clients, they're how we let go of clients. Um, and as a result, if you ask me what's the number one KPI you track as a CEO, I'll tell you what it is: unwanted attrition. In the last 12 months, we only had 9% of our employees leave in an industry that averages about 45%. And it was that simple. If we give our Katie employees a world class experience where they're trusted, where they're treated well, where they can grow, where they can learn more than they learn anywhere else, they'll stay. And when the clients don't feel a revolving door, they'll stay. And when there's not a revolving door, our economics remain healthy. And if our economics remain healthy, our culture remains healthy and it reinforces itself. So these last 2.5 years where I've watched every agency boom and bust and boom and bust, we've been lucky enough to grow from zero to now we're about 225 people. The only other answer I'll share, because it gets back to something you said earlier, and you're absolutely right, agency construction now is just whatever your imagination can go. We're headquartered here in Atlanta, where you see me right now, but we have 35 people in Serbia. We have 20 in India. We have 5 in Toronto. So we're a global company looking at human capital differently. Um, and it's the most rewarding job I've ever had. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world. And I love our industry. And I think we as an industry should stop making fun of our industry. And I think we as an industry should recognize how lucky we are. Um, and I think this is the greatest industry in the world. And I wish we'd all stop killing it.
Well, I have other questions, but I think
Sure.
this is actually the perfect place to stop because I don't think you could say anything any better. And maybe
Well,
what we'll do is we'll have another conversation down the road on some other topics. But
I would.
you've told some great stories. You've made some issues quite succinct. You've touched on the rational and the emotional, and I'm just pleased to see you do so well. and also and be an inspiration to the industry at large. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your approach, and thanks for telling great stories to the community. It's a great service. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Take care. The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories. Thanks so much for watching. If you find this kind of content helpful, please click like or subscribe. Again, thanks so much.